Einstein once said, "I never teach my pupils, I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn." Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerdy Optometrist, a podcast channel for all things optometry. And this is your host, Ukti Vora. Before we dive deep into this episode, please remember to listen to all my episodes and leave us a review if you enjoyed any. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. So as I started about talking about, a teacher or the importance of a teacher who creates an environment which actually helps everyone flourish, I'm so privileged to have someone who's doing that on a daily basis. Yes, that's her profession, that's her role in the eye care industry. I'm so excited to have Bansi Dhamecha with us. She's a qualified optometrist, studied at Aston University with over 10 years of experience within high street multiple chains, particularly with Specsavers, where she was the director at the Islington Specsavers for 5 years. She's an experienced supervisor, having managed several students who are now all qualified and successful optometrists. I believe that's her inspiration, which led to her starting in 2019. She founded OptoTutor, which focuses on supporting and providing guidance for pre-registration student optometrists before they even start the scheme for registration year. She also offers commercially aware courses for career progression and in-store development. It is definitely something which has helped many. I have her here today so that I can dig in deeper and understand how did this all start. So a very warm welcome, Bansi, to the Nerdy family.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. So I am definitely nervous because I usually get nervous in front of teachers, like I feel though it's been years, but it's always like, oh my God, she's doing such an amazing job, but it's so happy to have you here. And I would like to start with my first question, which I feel is very, very close to my heart, is how did you bump into the field of eye care? Was it planned or was it an accident?
It kind of probably a bit of both. My mum is actually an optometrist.
Oh.
So in terms of influence, that was there from the start. When I was in school, my influence was already, this is what mum does. It's something that I would go to after school, for example. I would do my homework in her office. I would spend time after school in the office, and even summer holidays and things like that, I would be there and helping out. So in one hand, yes, it was an accident. I kind of stumbled into it because it was there. It was an influence that was already part of my life. But in a way planned, because I knew from a very young age that actually this is something that I want to do. I can see the difference it makes for people that came in to see her, and once they left, how happy they were, how she had made a difference in their life. So it was a bit of both, planned and possibly a little bit of an accident as well.
That's wonderful. I have to thank your mom for introducing you early on to the world of eye care. And I have to say, for me, it was an accident. I had no idea what optometry was until I bumped into this profession, and then it's never looking back. For you, you had that exposure early on. So I'm glad, you're like, this is it. This is where I'm going to go.
Yep.
And tell me about your professional journey. I did briefly mention about your experience and your time at Specsavers. So let's start there. Like, how did Specsavers happen? Were you planning to join like a retail chain? Were you planning on opening your own practice? How was that?
So again, going back to the influence that I had, my mum being her own practice owner, I knew that no matter what, I will be my own practice owner at some point. But when I did my pre-reg, I was torn between either taking up a position with an independent or taking up a position with a Specsavers multiple chain. And in the end, I chose to go with Specsavers. And the reason for that was I knew I would be exposed to a lot more patients over a short period of time, giving me the maximum amount of exposure, that therefore then allowing me probably a little bit more experience by the end of my pre-reg. Now, that's not to say that an independent wouldn't have provided me with something that would have been equally useful. I could probably have had more time to be able to develop certain skills and have more one-to-one time with my supervisor, which I didn't necessarily get with where I was working. But in terms of then the next step was to then do, once I was qualified, having completed my pre-reg year, I then had the option to sit down with my retail director, and he said, well, what do you want to do next? I said, well, I want to own my own store eventually. So he said, right, well, here are the courses that you can do. These are the management courses that you can learn from. And whilst we're here, let's go through all these things together. So you can go through management accounts. You can go through how to run the business. You can go through all the things that are in the back office. And I learned off them, which then allowed me to then sit the assessment that the Specsavers require. And having completed that and, following through with all their assessments that they do require, I was then put onto a list that allowed me then to purchase a franchise. So it kind of just happened as a natural progression to where I actually was. And the Islington store was a very useful learning curve for me for that 5-year period. But then eventually got to that stage where I was ready to start a family, and having found out I was pregnant, I had to make that decision. Do I want to then put all my time and effort into this Specsavers, or do I want to be able to be available for my newborn baby? And newborn baby took priority, obviously.
That's wonderful. And I'm so happy you shared this journey with us, because I liked how you highlighted the fact, because many of us, when we get into like retail or bigger chains, we kind of tend to feel that this is what I need to do, this is the location, this is what I need to do, say for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, right? But I'm glad that Specsavers had that opportunity or a program that could allow you to train on the management side of things, because in optometry school, we never talk about it. We're not trained for that. And that's a complete different ball game. Like, it's like, oh my God, I have no idea. I can only do optometry. I don't know how to run a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about KPIs and talking about your conversion, talking about your average transaction value and things like that. Those are all the things that your employer is going to talk to you about. But as an optometrist, you're just here to say, well, this person has diabetes, or this person has a refraction of this much. But you're not necessarily going to say, well, I'm going to make a certain amount of sale, because we don't necessarily train to think on that sort of level. We are trained to think clinically and not necessarily commercially. But the two things do actually kind of go hand in hand. And when you are really good at making clinical recommendations, your KPIs will naturally increase without you trying to sell anything. As long as your recommendations are on point and they are relative to, your patient, you're making reasonable recommendations, then your KPIs will reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think taking these courses and taking these more training programs definitely does help to kind of understand the nuances of these kind of numbers, which might be good to hear, but we don't know where it, how to manage those. But glad you brought that up. And I'm so glad, you're talking about the how both of these areas do collaborate. It's not just optometry and clinical, it's always a business. We are running a business at the end of the day. And someone actually recently had mentioned this, which I felt was very cool, that we are all here to sell something. It could be your knowledge, it could be your business. So we are constantly selling. As much as we hate to say, oh, I'm not into sales, I'm into clinical, you're always, the end goal is to, sell things, and you need to do it professionally and, in a very well-learned manner. So that's very interesting of you to share about that. But I do know briefly, now that you said, the baby took priority, which is great. And I think that's when OptoTutor started. I think that would be the next phase. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So whilst I was in Islington Specsavers, I actually had grown my own optometrists over the last 5 years. So when I took over that practice, a lot of the optometrists that were in that store actually left. And when I came in, I was working 7 days a week, pretty much for the first year, just because we didn't have that cover where we were used to having 2 or 3, 4 clinics running in a day. We were now down to 1 because I had no optometrist. And so eventually I was like, well, I can't really rely on, someone new coming in. I'd rather just grow my own. So I, from then, started taking on pre-reg optometrists, and then making sure that they were qualified, then they stayed with me, and then taking on the next pre-reg who then qualified, then stayed on. So actually, when I decided that I needed to leave now, and I was actually heavily pregnant, I then announced that, look, I'm going to have to sell my shares, and then someone else will take over. But don't worry, pre-regis, I've got someone that will be able to look after you. They actually still came back to me. So my pre-regis actually came to my home to revise for their exams. And then the next pre-reg from the next year afterwards, who I had also lined up, and she was going through the processes with me whilst I was there. And then because I left, she had to do her pre-reg with another supervisor. She came to see me, and she said, "Do you know what? You really need to do this as a business. There are so many students that would definitely benefit from you." And this is something that I was doing with my students in my practice anyway. So it was not anything new. It was just something that I had put together to say, let's get you prepped for your exam, and let's get you organized so that you don't have any problems when it comes to doing that final exam. And that was kind of that catalyst. Although I was doing it anyway, although I had students coming home, it didn't seem like that was the professional, I'm giving it my all. And so when I had that conversation with that student, I thought to myself, do you know what? Maybe I should put a little bit more into it. Having spoken to my husband's an accountant. He said, well, let's crunch some numbers. Let's have a look. Let's see what we can do with this. And he said, you know what, if you want to give it a go, give it a try. So to begin with, I supplemented all the costs of running this business with locuming. And so that gave me a little bit of flexibility that wherever I needed it, I could cover some of my costs with locuming. And then because I built up a following, I was then able to then focus primarily on my students at OptoTutor. So now I have group chats with students asking questions almost on a daily basis. I have the online portal, which has loads of videos and links to articles, which then helps the student revise for their particular assessments. I've written a whole bunch of books, which then is focusing on the areas that the students would normally get assessed on, but breaking it down into very simple, very easy to understand steps. So whether it's dispensing or whether it's binocular vision, just breaking it down to very simple, manageable, understandable chunks. And then just now also doing one-to-one sessions with students where I can then say, right, let's watch your technique, let's watch your eye test routine, and say, you know, actually, you're standing too far to the side when you're doing your ret. That's why you're off axis. That's why you're getting a incorrect prescription. So very minute, very fine things that you can only get on a one-to-one level, as opposed to, you know, if you're sitting in a lecture room, you're not necessarily getting someone watching you and telling you what you as an individual need to do differently. So that's what I focus on. I focus on making sure that that one individual has that help that they actually need.
And I think that's fantastic. I feel there is definitely a huge scope and demand for these kind of coaching and training. And I'm glad, you know, that student recommended and you were able to provide that for students in UK. But one quick thing I want to go and kind of ask, like, did you have any other names other than OptoTutor? Do you have any story around the name of, you know, naming?
Well, we actually did go through a couple of different names. And what it was is that there were so many that was it was definitely going to be Opto something, but I couldn't figure out what would actually work. And even OptoTutor was a little bit iffy when I initially put it down on paper. And when I tried to draw out the logo and things like that, it was really quite difficult. We had Opto Coach, we had Opto Learn, we had Opto everything pretty much that had to do with teaching or tutoring. But the one that just made the most amount of sense was OptoTutor, and that's why we've stuck with that.
That's wonderful. I always love these stories behind the struggles. You're like, okay, now it's a brand, but you have no idea how much we struggle.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much pain, sweat, and tears that goes into it. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. And like, I also see one thing that, you know, you have books like available on your website, and we talk about books like, you know, people struggle to write one. It's a lot. You have 10. Yes.
Yeah.
So how did that journey happen? Like, you know, creating courses along with books is like a lot of work.
So one of the things that tends to happen is students write their notes down. And I found that when I was doing one-to-one calls with students, they would be looking down and writing notes, or now spending time whilst I'm talking to them, actually writing on their screens because they're on the iPad and they're making notes as they're talking to me. And I'm like, but you're not listening to me. I want you to actually listen to me and pay attention to the question that I'm asking you, because you're not really then engaging as much and you're not actually paying attention to what I'm telling you or teaching you. So one of the things that I used to do, and I still do now, is provide handouts or lecture notes for whenever it is that I'm doing one-to-ones, for example. And then I found that actually, if I put this on a paper and, just write down all the common things that I get asked, or the common areas that students are struggling with, it kind of made it into a thick enough book that I could then say, right, well, here you go, here's everything that you kind of really need to know about that one particular topic. And if you then are really still struggling afterwards, then absolutely come over and let's have a chat about it. But it then kind of just meant that, one, although I was able to then take a lot of time to put information down onto paper, it then meant that I was a bit more freer when it came to one-to-ones. My time was a bit more available for those that actually really needed it.
But glad you pointed out that, because honestly, this is something that even I struggle daily. Like I can't like talk and write. So sometimes I'll either record a meeting so I can go back and make my notes for any conversations or like important discussions I have, or I'll ask the person to kind of pause so I can make my notes. But I like this approach of you're like, okay, I've got you covered. Like you can read that and let's talk about more.
Yeah, I mean, one of the students that I had, she was really nervous. And when she had her assessment, so the stage 1 assessment, so the College of Optometrists breaks their assessments down into 3 sections, the stage 1, stage 2, and the OSCEs. And in stage 1, because of COVID, where it used to be in-person visits, they've now changed that the 2/3 of the assessments are actually done online. And one of my students got in touch and she said, I'm really struggling. I get really nervous and I can't answer the questions and I'm not able to get the words out. And it's literally in this format. So I said, okay, well, let's practice. And we spent time with me asking her questions. And in the first instance, it was the whole making notes, looking down, not actually paying attention and not engaging. I said, well, if you want to have that, the confidence to be able to answer the questions that I'm asking you, you really need to try and answer them on the spot without really trying to, think about it or looking through your notes or flicking through pages. That confidence will only come when you actually practice. And therefore, having those written notes and having those books there as a useful resource that you can then learn on the side, then means that when we do this, you have that confidence and that ability to actually have that discussion like you should with another healthcare professional.
Yes. And I think that's a very good tip. And I really liked how you also emphasized on the fact that let's practice. So in whichever phase or whichever part of exams you're struggling, like whether it's like an online interview or it's something to do with like paper, practice is always very essential. And I really appreciate how you're supporting the students. And I'm sure they can find so much value in this process. They can have someone they can reach out to and they can help and guide them throughout. But I know we did talk a lot about like students and what their initial process is. But there's also another part of OptoTutor, which I was like very impressed, and we did talk offline about it as well, where you also help them after becoming an optometrist, the business side of it, thanks to your experience, I believe, at Specsavers. So can you talk us a little more about like the courses or what you offer once someone has become an optometrist?
So I normally just do one-to-ones at the moment, but I do have sessions that I run for newly qualified students afterwards as well. So they have their information on how to gain their CPDs, how to actually log them and register them, what sort of things to do on the commercial side, what sort of things to do in preparation for their one-to-ones with their employers. If, say, for example, they have got a PDP meeting, so a professional development plan meeting with their employers in terms of what to consider, in terms like what to write down, what to prepare, what sort of notes to look out for. But I do also, just on an individual level, I keep in touch with all my students and they'll get in touch to say, Bansi, I'm having trouble with this or having trouble with that. So I do normally keep in touch with everyone and say, right, look, this is how we can get around whatever issue or problem you're having. I've had students that have contacted me saying, I'm struggling with my visa, for example. I had a student from India who was just in the process of sitting her last exam. And because of the timings, etc., it ended up being that we just kind of needed to sort something out for her so that she could sit her exam, so she could get qualified. So it's just, that period of time is crucial. But not only that, once you're qualified and trying to figure out what you're doing afterwards, that in itself is another big, massive change. It's a big transition. So I help students or newly qualified optometrists get through that first year or so, helping them, making sure that they have covered all their training requirements that they need for that year. And we will be doing CPD lectures in the future as well. So we are registered and have done a few CPD lectures, but have taken a break from that for the last year because obviously having been on maternity, I've only just come back right now. So I've taken a break for that for the last year. So we'll be going back into doing CPD content over the next year or so after as well.
That's wonderful. And this is something for all my listeners. I want you to kind of know that I understand that OptoTutor is focused on, students in a UK, but as she rightly mentioned, if you're planning to, study in UK, or if you're planning something on the business side as well, she can help you and support you in both the fronts. So she can help you prep even before you are there, and as well as after you are there. And we were actually touching upon some amazing stories which she mentioned about, like, how she was helping students or practitioners outside UK. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so I've had a few people reach out, and they are based abroad, some in Africa, some in Malaysia, some in India, saying, I need some help. Either I'm a practice owner or I've actually had university lecturers reach out for help and support as well in terms of what it is that they need to have in their lesson plans, etc., or even just asking for the resources that I have to be able to provide them in their local area. But I've had practitioners ask for help and support in terms of management, how to develop or grow their business, looking at the actual location in terms of what they can do to make themselves better, into standing out, what sort of equipment they need to have within their practice to kind of really just progress it a little bit more. I have done some training with practice owners that have staff members that need to be a little bit more commercially aware. So just helping them to provide that training, provide that interaction with the staff that are new, that maybe have worked elsewhere, that don't necessarily have the same understanding of what's expected of them. So just providing them with that commercial awareness. So as optometrists, we're not just focused just on the clinical aspect, we're focused on the retail side of running this business as well.
And I think that is such a requirement for in today's aspect, where, like, once we think of optometry, we're always into clinical for like 4 years. Once you're out, it is so much of commercial as well. And we need to have a balance, whether it is an independent practice or whether, working with a retail chain. We always have to think about the numbers and the commercial side as well. And having the support of someone who has such a vast experience, I'm sure, is like super helpful. So thank you for helping, everybody from around the world. It's really amazing of you to kind of, going out of your way and helping people all across. But I'm sure we talk about all the amazing things that you've done, but I also would like to kind of understand, did you have any roadblocks or any challenges throughout this journey?
I think every journey will have some kind of hurdle. When I initially started, I thought that COVID would be a roadblock because I had just found a place to rent. I had just found all this equipment that I'd bought. So I'd put so much investment into this new company that I've made. And then COVID hit. And then I'd lost all my locuming work. I lost 6 months worth of work that I had planned already in advance, which meant that, the worry of I'm going to struggle to make payments on this equipment that I've bought for this rent that I've just, secured. So I think COVID was a little bit of a scary period. And at that time, I chose to then run all my sessions for free. So for a 3-month period, I actually ran all my sessions for free because all the students were out of work as well. Everyone was furloughed. Everyone was struggling. No one was doing any assessments. So I knew that they were struggling. So I had run weekly sessions just to keep students revising, keeping that motivation up and keeping everyone going. And I think for me, that kind of kept me going too. And eventually got to a point where I got messages from students saying, "Oh, are you not doing them anymore? This is like a one thing I look forward to on a Saturday night." But yeah, no, that I think COVID was a roadblock, and financially was a really difficult time. But I was actually very lucky that I had the support of my husband, who kind of covered my bills for that period of time. And then I was able to kind of make my own back afterwards. So yeah, no, that COVID was definitely one of the roadblocks. I think after that, it's just about getting that word of mouth out. And because I don't really advertise much, and I'm not very good with social media, in all honesty. I have my cousin helps me a lot to say, "Oh, you should do this and you should do that." And I'm like, "You're a lot more hip with and a lot more in trend than I am. Whatever you do, I will. Whatever you say, I will do." And so with his support, I've actually got an Instagram account, etc. But yeah, I'm not very good at those things. So I think each little thing can sometimes amount to a roadblock. However, if you step up and say, "You know what, I'm willing to learn it, I'm willing to change, I'm willing to try and do it," it ends up being just a little hurdle.
Yeah, I love it. I love how you shared, like you said, like, there is a hurdle, there is a situation that, there were challenges in front of you, but you decided to kind of convert them into opportunity and make the most of it.
Absolutely.
Because even thinking of, and I really liked how you mentioned or talked about the fact that you did run your courses for free. Sometimes people are adamant on the fact, I'll pay. I mean, it should be a paid course or I'm not doing it because I don't want my knowledge to be, be out there for free, which is understandable. But sometimes having those free courses did help you spread the word as well, help you connect with the students, which will always be there for you because you were there for them as well. You were doing it to help as the baseline versus making it a business, which is, of course, at the end of the day, it is a business, but we need to have that human side to things as well. And I really appreciate that, you highlighted that fact that you did it for free. There's not always a price tag attached to it, but you never know how that can kind of get converted into a bigger price tag that you never would have even imagined,
Absolutely. Everything can be turned into an opportunity. You can always look for a silver lining in any kind of situation that you're in. And in most situations, I mean, I said that COVID was possibly a roadblock. Actually, thinking about it, it's probably the biggest opportunity that I got. And actually, that's only came from the fact that instead of saying, "Okay, well, I give up and I won't actually do anything," it was that mindset of actually, well, let's try something else. Let's try doing something differently. So instead of doing things one-to-one in person, we did a whole bunch of online courses. So, it keeps things going and that word of mouth gets out there. You're right. It's sometimes free things help spread the word. And that's exactly what I needed. So opportunity, roadblock kind of comes hand in hand, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So I did learn a lot about your journey, OptoTutor, and everything you do, but it's time for our game segment where I would like to learn a lot more about you. So it's a simple game. It's called This or That. I'll give you two options and you just have to pick one. So are you ready for it?
Yep.
Perfect. Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Dog.
All right. What do you prefer, a phone call or a text?
Text.
Glasses or contact lenses?
Oh, glasses.
All right. Online shopping or in-store shop?
I prefer in store. I think I'm old school like that.
All right. Cake or ice creams?
Oh, no. Now I can't choose. I actually just had a bowl of ice cream, so I think I'll go with cake now.
All right. All right. Horror movie or comedy?
Comedy.
Okay. And oceans or mountains?
Oceans.
All right. And I think you did wonderful in this or that. We definitely know a lot more about you. With that, before we end our episode, do you have any final takeaway message for all my listeners?
Just that if you do need help, or if you are, knowing someone that requires any help or support, feel free to step up and help them yourselves. If you can't step up and help, then obviously point them in the direction of maybe someone that can, whether it's a local person, whether it's a supervisor, whether it's another person that you know, or myself, whoever can help. It sometimes does make a massive difference in that one individual's journey. I now think of the way that I work as not giving a man a fish. It's teaching him how to fish so that he can support himself forever. And sometimes that little bit of help and support, whether it comes from myself, whether it comes from somebody else that you know, someone else that can help in someone else's journey, it's just one little step that can make a massive difference on that other individual's life.
Thank you so much once again, Bansi, for sharing your journey and everything about OptoTutor. We really enjoyed learning about your journey, and it's truly inspiring. For all those who want to reach out to Bansi, I'll be dropping the information, her information. You can connect with her on LinkedIn, as well as I'll be dropping the link of our website, OptoTutor, in the description. So do check it out. And please do remember to help anyone and everyone, to support them so they can be successful. With that, thank you so much once again, and welcome to the Nerdy family.
Thank you very much for having me.